Hey guys, it's Simon. Wanted to go over where we're at in the market and kind of plug some things together, mostly for myself and obviously sharing with the rest of the room. Remember, nothing in this video should be intended as a trading recommendation. This is purely for educational purposes only. I am not an investment advisor. Trading futures is risky. If you would like to trade futures, make sure you consult an investment professional. Make sure it's right for you. Nothing in the Twitter stream or any other social media avenue should be taken as trading recommendations. Anyways, and this is for educational purposes only. Let's move on because I am tired. So the first thing that of interest, the exact same trading pattern Friday, right? It was really frustrating to get hung up here in this area here. So when I kind of go through the steps and I go through my journal, my thought process was this morning, we rejected quickly out of Globex low on the overnight session. I'll pull up that chart. So when I came in from the overnight session, we did get run up to the upside here. This was on some kind of, out of Europe, there was some type of currency war decision or focus that ran us up. We got hung up, then we ran down. My thought was we could kind of extend up here, but then if we trap back down below into the structure again off of London's high here, that we could really, I thought we could roll to the downside and at least get gap fill from Friday, which would have been this 2040 area. And so what happened in that process? I think it's important to know. So when I'm trading, I'm trying to integrate what my opponents are going to try to accomplish via the price action that's being shown, okay, and what is logical in that process. So my thought was we were unable to test Friday's high, and really Friday's high or Thursday's high, right? Excuse me, what was it? It was Friday's high. Why did I have this zone move back here like this? I had it for a purpose. I'm not sure what that is or why I had this structured this way. It really should have been lower. Maybe I made an error. At any rate, long story short, I really thought we could get into, I don't know why I had it moved back like this. I'll have to go back and go through my thinking again. But at any rate, I did have the zone here. We landed at 2052 essentially overnight on that push up. We had an open gap below. Of particular note, on Friday afternoon, as I'm trying to piece these pieces together, NQ was really weak all day, right? We got an initial push up and then we just rolled down all day Friday. And there was a significant difference between the price action in the market on Friday and the price action on and wow, I'm so tired. Let me restate that. There was a significant difference between ES and NQ, with NQ being significantly weaker on Friday than ES was. My thought process was overnight that it would make an attempt to either catch up to NQ on the downside or NQ would get run up and we would follow. Obviously, we had a news event overnight and it pushed up to 2053 or 2052 in the overnight session, right? So I then pointed out, right, we had a different way of looking at this. So when we look at this market, the other way to look at it was at this point, first of all, things had changed a little bit. NQ was pushing and we had a Fed speaker right at 9:25 in the morning. And you can see very specifically from the price action, right, that this essentially, if you looked at the dome, there wasn't a lot of two-sided trading in the dome. It was pretty much narrow grind to the upside. So basically what happened was there's a lack of, in my eyes, there's a lack of participation. Those that were short in front of the Fed came in and covered, whether they were cash shorts or actual physical future shorts or stock shorts, covered into the event. And then we obviously rolled over, and I pointed that out in the morning when I was trying to figure out the structure of the market, right? I said, if we trap back below this 2053.50 on the downside, that we could roll to the other end of the range, right? And come into gap fill. and we almost got to gap fill. So the target was to get long originally was 2041.75 down to 2040.75. I expected responsive buyers. But additionally, you'll notice once we trapped, it was all over. Look at it. There was no 50-60 back in. See that? There was no availability of a 50-60 back in. Very frustrating, right? But if you waited calmly, right? We came right to the 50-60, rolled off of it, and as a matter of fact, we did a second 50-60 back. You'll notice it didn't close behind the 62 retrace 2 times, and finally gave a push to the downside. You know, it's interesting because before we got that 62 retrace, when you look at it right here, you can okay, so a couple of notes. This made sense. This was the true mid from the day's high to the day's low, this 62 retrace, but you can get in trouble by drawing these smaller 62 retraces. This was not as obvious as it looked, especially if you looked at the price action and I noted it. And I'm really just trying to get, again, the purpose of the video is to both point out what happened, crank through my thought process, and try to improve that thought process, catch the nuance so I can improve tomorrow. Trading wise, I ended up the day down today. Slightly, but I was still down. I couldn't get over to the hump. Technically I was only down a tick or two, but with commissions I was down closer to 3 ticks, I think. Yes, and so long story short, I saw the short here. There was no 50-60 until we rolled all the way through. We did point out, right, that see how I pointed out this morning that this whole area was very easily auctioned through. It was easily auctioned through here. It was easily auctioned through overnight, right? So we moved pretty swiftly from 2033 to 2052, right? We then moved very swiftly just the opposite, right? We just reworked, we did a mirror image of this in a very frustrating, long, stretched out manner. We mirror imaged this move all the way back down in the afternoon. So I'm going through the day, and so when I came into the day, remember, my thought process was we rejected out of Globex high, we got a pretty strong rejection, and then my thought was a 50-60 back up here, and I'm talking about this initial rejection in the first 10 minutes of the day. Again, I'm not per se saying I'm looking for responsive sellers here, but I was thinking in my head we had a shot at getting that pushed down. If you look on this bar, not the bar, this bar right here. Let's try this again. Do this bar right here, here to here. We pushed back into the 50-60. After we had that rejection down, I thought if I could grab it here at this 50-60, I could get a roll to the downside. That never occurred, right? And then we pushed, we couldn't quite get into the 2053.50 to 25.55.50. And so I got caught in a bad way, and I want to discuss that for a second because it's important. Because I got aggressive here, right, that meant that even if I put my maximum stops, let's say I took the short at, let's just call it 2051 for the sake of conversation because I don't remember where I entered exactly. So that meant if I take 5 points, which is about as much heat as I'm willing to take full size, that put my stop right at 2056. Okay, now this is a really important concept for me and to be able to teach the guys I'm coaching, right? If I'd simply waited for the zone, right, and I had my stop at 2057.50, which I pointed out was the appropriate place for the trade, right? So let's say you took the front of the zone, 53.50, ran all the way back to 55.50, 56, right? Your stop was at 57.50, and then it rolled off. Once it rolled off, all you had to do was leave your stop 1 point behind the back of the zone, and you either caught the entire move to the downside, okay? Or if you have a time limit on the zones, which, again, that's not always the worst idea, you had 5, 10, 15, 20, and at 20 minutes, you could pretty much cover that trade flat, right? I don't have a set formula that's working right now because the market's kind of in a funky place. We're not ripping to the upside, but we're driving to the upside, right? So normally I do put a limit on how long I'm willing to wait, and I'm not over eager for shorts. But in the last 2 days, shorts have worked better than they have, I'd say, in the whole past month, right? And I said before the open that shorts were opening up. But this is really important. This zone had a reason for it, right? I logicked through why I wanted trade location here, right? I audibled, and so when I'm in the room and I go, hey, if you're an aggressive trader, right? So for the whole past month and a half, 2 months, I've been very aggressive on my entries, right? And I've been rewarded for that. But there is a downside. There's a flip side to that. I got aggressive in this case, and I got aggressive and I was making a shot for gap fill down here, and the market just pushed me far enough to where I got tagged. So if I'd say, well, I'm not aggressive, right? I could have changed that posture, right? And I said, I'm just going to wait for trade location here, right? Then the only decision I had to make was how patient I was going to be on time, because my 4-point stop, right, 2 points behind the back of the zone. At that point, you had stretch. You had a lot of things that looked really comfortable, right? And so here's the important part of it, right? People are constantly, when you're a trader, people are constantly switching off. One day they say, oh, I'm an aggressive trader. The next day they say, oh, I'm not an aggressive trader, right? So I'm pretty much always an aggressive trader. That's always my position. I trust my read. It's going to be pretty often that I'm going to, if I think I have an appropriate read and I think that the gap up was BS, which I did, I'm going to be aggressive on my entry. In this particular case, usually it rewards me. In this particular case, it smoked me, right? And then additionally, once I saw that it was starting to roll down, I was kind of left with the option of being a watcher here at this point. And then I had to roll to my next trade, and I want to show you why I had difficulty with it. My next trade in that series was to pull a 50-60 from the swing long to swing high. Now, this was hard, right? Because in order for this trade to work, I had to believe we're going to at least get a retest. And I was concerned because of the narrow range and because of how the market behaved Friday that we would get swept. So I want you to follow this really, really closely. I already committed that I was going to take the 62 retrace because it works a great deal of my time. And I said, if you are aggressive, okay, if you're an aggressive trader, you can shoot for the 62 retrace. But you may have to look for a one tick of the low and a push back up, right, at the bottom, or to look for entry near gap fill, one of the two, right? And you'll notice that if you took, right, the one tick of that low, it at least gave you 15 minutes to make an attempt to try back in. But the bottom line was none of this was working, okay? So you've got to ask yourself and kind of scratch your head and go, okay, well, what the hell is going on? Because I got smoked. So if you look, what this shows is when you're out of step and you're aggressive, two things. You're out of step and you're aggressive. The market is doing something different than what you anticipated it was doing. In this case, the market continued to drive when I expected to at least get a retest to the mid here for a scale, right? Didn't happen, or a drive into the gap fill, okay? So I already took a loss here, right? I closed, and I said I was going to get as close to the 62 retrace as I possibly could. In this case, I think my long was 61. And if it closed behind the 62 retrace, I said when I took the trade that I would need it to get above Globex low, Globex high quickly and push. So I basically needed to snap in, snap out, and go. That did not happen, right? So I closed the trade right here. So check it out. I'm in step, but I'm out of step, right? I make the decision to take the stop right here when it closes behind. And so the next thing I want to know is, well, was that a good decision or not? Well, it was. Look, we rolled all the way down. Everyone looks at it and goes, well, duh, that's obvious, right? But it's not obvious. You get agitated, right? Think about it. I got stopped here. I couldn't re-enter here. I didn't have a setup. I get stopped here. And at this point, psychologically, this is where traders go south, right? They go, well, I'm going to try here, and I'm going to try here, and I'm going to try here, and I'm going to try here. And you keep taking losses, right? I did a really good job, even though I had taken two, not horrible losses, but pretty bad losses, right? And from here on out, I'd already decided I really wasn't going to call much in the room from this forward, because just like everything else, even if I'm saying I'm looking for responsive buyers, if I'm not on, I certainly don't want to say it out loud, right? What I'm thinking about doing, I went on a mission. So at this point, I was pretty aggressive through all of this, trying to scratch my way back to flat for the day, which I came close to doing, right? If you look here, as we go through the rest of the day, I want to make sure I finish my thought here. This was important, right? I could have said, well, my stop was 1 point below swing low, but that would have gotten hit right here, and it really would have finished me for the day. I would have essentially had the equivalent of actually slightly more than 8 points on full-size trade back-to-back. Instead, I modified, I closed this trade out, and I didn't allow the frustration, because you could go in your head now. You would have been, Simon, that was stupid. You should have just waited right here, and you would have made all this money, right? That assumes, of course, I wouldn't have taken the trade out here, right? Which, who knows? Secondly, I took another trade here and got swept. I knew that was possible. Again, it was aggressive. And then I wasn't able, the third step was I did not take this trap back in. We one ticked the low, and I didn't take this. The only reason I didn't take this is I just got stopped right here. So one thing that's important to me is that I don't exasperate my losses, that I put some space and time in between what's going on, right? So I scalped a little bit here. I waited. I'm not sure if I scalped this. I know I did scalp this area here, and I was able to get back to scratch. I was still down probably about 2 points when I went to lunch over here at this point right here. So my point behind all this, as I'm dragging on, I made some choices that were aggressive choices. Those weren't mistakes, right? I actually had chosen to be aggressive here. But because I was aggressive here, it meant that I was kind of screwed up here. There really was no way to adjust the trade without significantly increasing my stop to an unacceptable level for me. So when you're in this area, right, you've got to balance the risk reward. If your trade plan says you can be aggressive, you have to be willing to pay the price for that aggressiveness, with sometimes having the trade roll against you. I'm pretty sure if we didn't have the Fed speaker today, this trade would have rewarded me with a drive towards gap fill. That's good to know, because I can come back in and trust my instinct again the following day. Next, this 50-60, if we maintain tight ranges, I will continue to try to pump that 50-60. It works for me a great deal of the time. I can sustain the losses. When it doesn't work again, if it just simply closed behind the 62 retrace, that was enough for me, and it saved me a bit of pain. So that was a series of crummy outcomes to what was otherwise a good decision-making process, right? And that's important, because I don't have to come back in tomorrow and figure out if I know what the hell I'm doing, right? I can come back with a knowledge and security that I'm making good decisions all the way through, and that's very, very important for me. Okay, last. Through this. Last piece. As we are going through the day, right, we had the 62 retrace. That was pretty logical. Had I been here, I was out to lunch with my wife. Had I been here, that was a logical place to take the trade, right? Others, so that was one logical place. Others saw the 62 retrace after the trap back in here, right? See the structure? Close back into structure on this bar. There was a 50-60 here. Excuse me. There was no 50-60 here, but this was the first 50-60. Came right to the 62 retrace. Again, you could have used the same line in both these areas as you did here. And this is where people end up quitting, right? They get a stop here and they go, that doesn't work, I'm not taking it anymore. Then they don't take this 62 retrace, and they don't take this 62 retrace, right? And it's a perfect example of how, if you stayed consistent, assuming you were here and assuming that it was all right for you to trade into the afternoon, the 62 retraces were really 2 for 3. There was actually a third one here, if you look. And also, the other thing that I find in the afternoons is when the morning gets mucked up by speakers in the morning, a lot of the good PA shifts to the afternoon. Anyways, if you look at all the 50-60s, at least the ones that I can see of reason, we had one fail, and then 1, 2, 3 work pretty well. So again, I'm confident with the 50-60s, and I would continue to push that trade as a profitable trade in most circumstances. In addition, I don't have to change my trading style because my read was pretty much correct. We did come in for the gap fill. And then the piece that really saved my day, let me tell you, I think this is really, really important. I could have really screwed this up here. Remember earlier, I was looking for responsive buyers between 2041.75 and 2040.75, right? So ideally, if we could have swept and closed the gap right here, I would have had a beautiful trade that would have eventually, run for 10 points, right? No fill, it ran. I didn't get frustrated, right? I ended up leaving for lunch. But I could have come back and said, because it's a very common pattern when the market just misses its gap fill, where it'll come in, just miss, it'll make an extension up, roll around, and then come in and fill the gap, and then come back through. And in a strong market or an overextended to the downside, it'll do that. And I looked and I said, okay, well, it's the last hour. Normally, I don't like to trade in the last hour. It's the risk is increased. Why is the risk increased? Because all the PA that didn't happen over here because we were in a tight balance area got pushed out to the end of the day. So you run a double risk, right? Either shorts get trapped and they all get forced to push back to the other way. That was one possibility. Or they could sweep to the downside. The problem is I had no edge, and that's because gap fill came in where there was absolutely no structure. And as a matter of fact, if you look behind it, it was poorly auctioned behind it. And you can see they ran it right down to where it was no longer poorly auctioned. You can see that right here. And then in the after hours, they've continued to push down into 2033, right, and down towards 2032 Globex low, right? So that kind of puts the whole day together for me. I want to understand what my opponent's trying to accomplish. And then I want to see if I was off or I executed in a way that wasn't beneficial to me. A, did I protect my flank? B, did I make good decisions through the course of the day? And this area right here, I want to reiterate, this is a place where a lot of traders get in trouble here. They go, dude, I'm barely down right here. And if I can just snag this push back up on the gap fill, right? If I can snag this push back up on the gap fill, I can make it all back, right? Instead, I chose to surrender, take the loss home with me for the day. Small loss, but I'm taking this loss home with me for the day. Another thing I want to point out, a lot of people here, and I had everyone in the room, or a good deal number of people in the room calling for gap fill at this point. And look how many times they try to push it down through here. And this is a retail Harry Carry nightmare right here. Guys kept falling on their knives because they were pushing. You can see guys are pressing here at the low to try to get the break, right? And the market is just whipping them out. And this is a place where if you're not a disciplined trader, if you're entering and re-entering, and not only that, but you're chasing, right? You're not even waiting for the extensions up, but you're trying to load in at the bottom end of this area. This is a killer. This is where you get 2 or 3 multiple 2-point stops only to watch it finally break and go. Additionally, on the gap fill, notice we had over an hour of consolidation at the end of the day. There was a lot of energy built up into that. And if they could finally break it, they would sweep it. But you could see this in the price action. You could see them trying to press for the breakdown here. Look at all the wicks. They were just pressing too hard and being forced to cover right in here. I found that price action really interesting. I called it in real time in the room. At any rate, long story short, looking at this price action, looking at the time of day, using some discipline, and not feeling desperate to make every day an absolutely huge day really kept me safe. And kept everyone in the room, I think, safe. So most people had a profitable day in the room. I didn't, but I've been on quite a run, and this was a minimal stop. So I'll come back in tomorrow and do my best to kill it. So anyways, hope that made sense. Have a good night. That was done mostly for me to get through my thinking process, which, as you can see, is on occasion muddied, and I need to iron it out. Anyways, I'm tired now. I'm going to watch my daughter run her first track event. Hope everyone has a good night. Talk to you later.